Thanks for coming. I appreciate your time. I'd like to tell you a story about Panera that has absolutely nothing to do with 21st century learning. About 5 years ago, I was in Columbus, and I just finished working, and I had some papers to grade, and I wanted a cup of coffee and a bagel while I went to get my work done. So I stopped in a Panera, and walked in, and I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Her name was Grace. She was wearing her Panera outfit, her costume, whatever you want to call it. And I walked right up to her like you do, and I said, "Grace, it's so good to see you again. How's your dad? How's your sister? Tell me how your college classes are going." Now, I got to tell you something about Grace. She was one of those kids that you meet every once in a while. Just really knocks your socks off. I mean, she was smart. She was able to do synthesis. She was funny. She was open-minded. She had all the things that she needed to be successful. So you can imagine my surprise when she told me that she had dropped out of Columbus State Community College because she felt stupid. Grace was my student. I taught Grace in my first assignment as a teacher, and I couldn't help feeling that ownership of a young person. And that really got me thinking about what I was doing in the classroom. Was I teaching Grace and the kids like Grace according to what they needed to be successful in college and work readiness, according to their generation's expectations? Or was I teaching them according to what my generation's expectations? Was I teaching the way that I had been taught, a 20th century model? That made me ask some hard questions of myself. And I began really interested in that gap. The gap between where we are right now and where we know we want to be. That gap between 20th century learning models and 21st century learning models. And y'all have been seeing a lot of great, fantastic, innovative teaching today in those workshops. What my team and I do at Upper Arlington City Schools, we try to come up with ways to meet teachers where they are and help them individually bridge that gap between the 20th century and the 21st century. My official title is 21st Century Learning Integration Coach, which I know is a bit of a buzzword and it's awfully hard to say. But the bottom line is I'm not an expert. Even though I quote data and research often in my work as a coach, and I'll be using some of that data today in my talk, I am no expert. What I do though is coach teachers from kindergarten to 12th grade all day, pretty much every day, trying to help them get what they need to achieve 21st century learning. So as I talk about 21st century learning, I'm going to first establish myself. This is what I mean. I don't just mean teaching with technology. And I know that I'm speaking to the choir here. But when I say 21st century learning, I mean the content standards, I mean the skills, I mean the literacies, technology literacy, media literacy, data literacy. I mean the big conceptual understandings that students need in order to be successful in college and work readiness 10, 20, and 30 years down the road. That's what I mean. Now on the left-hand side there, you'll see that's the way that I was taught when I graduated from Worthington. And that's how I was taught in the 80s and the 90s. And I'd imagine that's how most of you were taught as well. That's not the reality of work anymore. I think we all recognize that. I think the reality of work is now this. It's a collaborative model where students are solving problems, where they're working together and they're communicating what works. They're doing authentic work in the classroom, like with Mid-Ohio Food Bank. They're working in the community. That's what school and work looks like today. So 21st century learning means a good deal, but it doesn't just mean working with technology. Now, I'd rather show you an example of two good teachers from Greensview Elementary, from my district, talking about what 21st century learning means in a 4th grade classroom. Okay? It's a very short clip, but you'll hear them talk about the kind of work that their students are expected to do. These are 10-year-olds, and their challenge was, after their plant unit, could they take everything they learned about plants and design a shipping container to get the plant alive from the nursery to the consumer?
Identify an authentic problem, something that is that they can identify with. So a package as being a technology is something that they come in contact with all the time, because our world is a design world where everything has been engineered to meet our needs. So students also have to go through the process of asking good questions and creating a plan. They have to work together and communicate and collaborate so that they can reach their goals. And then when they're finished, they actually aren't finished. They have to test it, and they have to try to improve their package so that the plant has everything that it needs and meets the needs of both the form and the function that the consumer wants.
10-year-olds engaging in the inquiry design process. That's what 21st century looks like to me. Now, this is all well and good, and we can talk about 21st century learning and how it's happening in some of the schools like Reynoldsburg and Metro and some of the places that we're working at here. I mean, really amazing stuff at Upper Arlington City Schools. But the reality of the situation is that when we talk about change, when we really talk about change initiatives, about moving from one model that works well to another model, this is what we feel like. And a lot of the teachers that I talk with, a lot of the schools that I visit to, I see a lot of heads nodding up and down right now. Maybe some people that you work with feel this way. Maybe you feel this way. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pike for us. Teachers right now, maybe not in your school, but a lot of teachers feel overworked, they feel undervalued, and they certainly feel under attack politically in this state. And when you couple that with the fact that we've got a history of scattershot, poorly implemented, or poorly supported change initiatives, the flavor of the month. I hear teachers say things like, "Oh, I've seen this before in 1978." Right? Then you've got a potential mix for real cynicism. But then there's one more factor. That's the Margaret Mead factor. And if you don't recognize Margaret Mead from maybe anthropology or American history, maybe you'll remember the quote, which is on just about everything, from coffee mugs to t-shirts to bumper stickers. You know that old quote about a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens changing the world? Indeed, it's the only thing that it has. As an optimist, I want to believe that Margaret Mead was right. But as someone who uses data and research in my work as an instructional coach, folks, studies, and right now I'm particularly quoting Dr. Doug Reeves, studies show that most of the time, the change initiatives that administration and schools try to implement are only supported by 4 to 6% of an organization's members. Yeah, I'm seeing more head nodding out there. So you know what I'm talking. Small groups of people who get inspired by a book or a workshop or a professional development experience, and so they say, okay, we're gonna revamp how we do education in such and such district. When the fact of the matter is, the data is suggesting that you need 75 to 90% of an organization's membership to buy in before you have permanent, sustainable change. So we're talking about the difference between 6%, maybe your administrators, your principals, and some innovators in your district, versus 90%. You've got to have systematic buy-in. As an instructional coach, someone who works with both individual teachers and the district administration trying to enact change on a structural level, that indicates some pretty heavy lifting. That means that we've got our work cut out for us. And so, my team at Upper Arlington began to devise ways that we could implement some change strategies to meet individual teachers where they were. Well, maybe you've heard about innovators, early adopters, late changers, and then the people that just won't move out of their comfort zone. The data suggests something like this. About 15% of an organization, they're innovators. Okay, they're always changing the game, they're pushing the envelope. They're the people where you go and say, hey, we're going to start doing this technology in the classroom. They say, oh, we've been doing that for 2-3 years already. They're always the ones who are pushing the game. And there's a lot of innovators in this room right now. A lot of innovators in this room right now. But then there's another group of people, the adopters. About 55% of your organization are going to be people that would be more than happy to adopt these best practices into their classroom, right? Maybe they just don't know how to do it, or maybe they don't know exactly the right way to go about it, or maybe they're just too busy. or they've got families and they can't be innovating during the evening. So that's about 55% of an organization's membership. And then you've got another 30%. And that 30% that knows about the change message, but they're quite content to not do anything about it for a variety of reasons. So we've got 3 teachers that I'm going to introduce you today. I've changed their names, but these are all definitely real teachers I've worked with in the past 2 years. And each one of these 3 teachers represents a different type, a different category. We're going to start off with Tony. I'm going to introduce you to him. He is an innovator. I'm going to talk about what he does and what change strategy works best for him. Then we're going to talk about Shayna, who's a teacher I work with at the middle school, and how Shayna needed a different kind of change strategy in order to motivate her to be one of that 90%. Finally, we're going to talk about Regina, and Regina is one of that 30% that is nervous. Okay, that is quite content to keep doing the same things that she's been doing for a long time. And what she needs to motivate her to be part of that 90%. 3 stories, 3 change strategies. The first person is amazing Tony. And he's amazing Tony because everything he does is just magical. Like a lot of the innovators in this classroom, we've got a lot of Tonys in here, right? This particular Tony, he is not married and he has no kids. That's important because he's got a lot of time to do the things that he wants to do. And one of the number one things he wants to do is innovate for his classroom, figure out new technologies, learn about backwards design, learn about formative assessment. He does this thing on his own time so he can help his kids. He's passionate about it. So Tony's the kind of guy that will create these backwards designed units with a really cool project-based assessment, integrate technologies along the way. We've got the formative assessment. We've got the benchmarks. Students are learning. Boom, they do the authentic problem-solving experience at the end. And they're doing like undergraduate level work at the age of 16, 17 years old. Okay? He's an innovator. But the thing we found about our innovators is that when the message from the top and from people like me don't mix, or when they don't match up, when it's confusing, when it's not clear, when people don't understand what their goals and visions are, they begin to be upset. They become frustrated. What's going to motivate Tony to be part of this 90% is that he needs to feel a valuable part of the group. He needs to understand where the vision is, where the goals are, how long is it going to take us to get there, what's going to change, more specifically, what's not going to change. He needs to understand that the organization has got a higher purpose, and it's a clear higher purpose, and he's invited to be a part of that. A clear, simple vision. And the next teacher I'm going to talk about is Shayna. Now that we've met Tony, here's Shayna. The inspired Shayna. And she's a teacher who works in the middle school, and she's got a lot of great ideas. For example, she wants to do stuff with graphic novels. So our kids will debate whether or not graphic novels are a valid form of literature. She'll put them next to classics. And so she's got these great ideas, but she doesn't always know about what Tony is doing. She doesn't know about all the innovative best practices that Tony is doing. And so she's part of this 55% of teachers that know about innovative practices, but aren't quite sure how to fit them into their own classroom experience. So what my team does for teachers like Shayna is invite them into groups where we flatten the hierarchy. We bring the best of what's out there. We bring the best of what Tony creates to Shayna. We have one such group in our district called 21st Century Learning Cohort. We get about 40 teachers from across the district. We give them technology. We give them access to instructional coaches. We give them access to people outside the district, experts in their field. We share best practices. We share the best of what's going on there right now. And we bring it all to them. We get them out of the classroom about once a month for an entire day. And we share the best of what's out there and give them time to work on it. We give them workshop time so that they can figure out ways to integrate the best into their classroom practices. It's absolutely critical to have teachers like Shayna work with teachers like Tony. That's why you've got to have Tony buy into the message. But you've got to give Shayna time to integrate Tony's practices. So that's how Shayna became inspired. And here's the thing about Tony and Shayna. Tony's going to be your vanguard if they believe in the higher purpose. He's going to be the guy that can help to lead groups, create tools and templates, but he can't be the revolution. Because every time Tony's got a success, people look at Tony and say, well, of course he did X. Of course he integrated Google Docs into his, of course he learned how to use iMovie and have all his kids do iMovie projects. Of course he's Tony, he's amazing. But every time Shayna has a success like that, and your school's got a real feather in its cap, because that's a signpost to all the other Shaynas, the rest of that 55%, that, hey, if she can do it, I can do it too. The Shaynas become leaders for each other. They begin to teach each other. And this particular Shayna is becoming the leader of her department. She's sharing best practices with her entire team, and she's getting that entire grade level excited about some of the cool stuff she's doing in this 21st century learning cohort. We found out that in order to get her to be part of that 90%, we bring the best of what's out there to her. And then the last, the 30%. Because even if you get every Tony and every Shayna on board, you're only going to be at 70%. And I've been working, actually, Regina was one of the first people that I met in my new assignment. And we became friends really quickly because we found out that we had a mutual love for the Rolling Stones. So we would spend lunch periods trading singles and mixes and albums and things like that, talking about Mick Jagger was really too old to, have another tour, which he's clearly not if you've seen his new band. He just totally rocks out. So anyway, that's how I became friends with Regina. Now, Regina is a tried and true teacher who values traditional education. One of her daughter goes to Vanderbilt, her son goes to Boston. She values traditional, tried and true methods. And honestly, she told me, like the first week we met, that she was terrified of my presence because all the things that I brought to the table really made her nervous. She didn't want to learn anything new. This particular Regina didn't want to learn anything new. So I began to think of a way that I could get Regina. And so I noticed that Regina was a close collaborator with another teacher, a younger teacher who I thought might be open to some different teaching practices, some of this 21st century learning. And so I said to her, hey, would you be interested in a research project that got your kids to be excited talking about their own cultures and sharing their thoughts with a podcast, an audio broadcast, and we could make it with GarageBand, and then they could share with the classes, and they could take this content that they've been learning and share it out, right? And then we'll do a critical reflection exercise at the end, and they can talk about what a great experience. She said, yeah, I'll go for that. Not Regina, but her collaborator. And I said, okay. So we're going to go through this module, and she did. She taught it. She taught her kids how to use GarageBand. After she learned it herself, she went through the process. She taught her kids. They had these amazing outcomes. Amazing outcomes. In the critical reflection period, her kids said that was their favorite project, and they learned more in that project than they had learned in the entire rest of the semester. Pretty good data. So then I was able to take that entire completed module with all the data and all those reflections right over to Regina. It's done. You don't have to do a thing. All you got to do is learn how to do GarageBand. Would you like to try this out? Knowing the data, knowing the outcomes, knowing that kids have this amazing, enlightening experience. Want to do this? She said, yeah. She had the exact same outcomes as her collaborator. So even though Regina at first was unwilling to move into this 21st century learning that we're all talking about, we found a way to get to her. That's what motivates a Regina to move to that 90%, to buy into what we're talking about. They've got to see two things. Let the outcome make believers. And what I mean by that is they've got to see that 21st century learning can create better data, better outcomes than what they were doing before. It can't be a switch, okay? Then there's no impetus for change. They've got to see that students are learning more, they're hanging on to more, they're making more meaning out of the content than what they were doing before. But they also need to see that 21st century learning is inspiring for the teacher, that it makes you feel like you were first teaching, that passion about learning new things, about teaching. 21st century learning isn't just for the students. It's for us. It's cool to do this new kind of stuff. So we've talked about Tony, Shayna, and Regina. Now, I'm not saying we've achieved success in Upper Arlington City Schools by any means. We've got a long way to go. But we've begun to identify different ways that we can get an entire district that was once very comfortable with traditional ways of teaching and learning into the 21st century mentality. The bottom line is, every day we got to be asking ourselves, what do our kids need? What do our kids need to be successful, college and work readiness in the 21st century? And that's what we've got to be doing. We don't want any more graces. We don't want any more kids on our watch to feel like they're not able to do something because they weren't prepared in our classrooms. So I'm going to ask you one question as I bring this to a close. After you leave here today, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, what's one thing that you can start doing next week in your classroom, with yourself, with your team, with your administration, to start bridging that gap? How can you mind the gap? Thanks very much. Appreciate it.